Thanks for watching and welcome. This training is for dietitians and healthcare professionals who work with pediatric selective eaters. So my goal in this short video, under 15 minutes, is to define and clear up confusion about differences between picky eating, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or ARFID, and pediatric feeding disorder, or PFD, because the correct treatment is going to depend on the correct diagnosis. So hello, my name is Jennifer House. I'm a pediatric dietitian and I help other pediatric healthcare providers move from feeling unqualified and stuck to confident and competent when working with picky eaters or kids with ARFID or PFD. I'm also the mom of 3 kids, one who was a very selective eater for years, a dietitian with a bachelor and a master of science in nutrition, and I've owned First Step Nutrition for 18 years. I have extensive training in helping selective eaters, including K2MU sequential oral sensory training. And I imagine that if you also work with picky eaters, you've probably been in a consult with at least one kid who only eats Dino Nuggets and Pediasure. And you probably tried recommending the regular strategies like expose them to new foods in different ways, pair new foods with preferred foods, decrease the pressure, and the caregivers say, "We've already tried that, it didn't work." And I want you to know that it's normal and not your fault to be uncertain and second guess yourself in these extreme picky eating cases. And that's why I created the Pediatric Feeding Network for Healthcare Professionals over 5 years ago now to provide the kind of support I wish existed when I was stuck. Because feeding challenges like these, they aren't covered in our schooling, at least not in a way that helps prepare us for some of these real life cases. So to start, a brief definition of picky eating. And there are lots of different definitions, but generally picky eaters tend to grow well, don't have any nutrient deficiencies, they aren't socially impaired by their eating, so they can eat at school or at a restaurant, but this can still cause plenty of parental stress. For prevalence, a variety of studies across the world suggest up to 50% of kids at some point are picky eaters. But with these kids, generally, the division of responsibility in feeding will be enough to help the family get them back on track. But that will not be enough for all kids, including those with PFD and ARFID, or avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. And I'm not going to cover ARFID in detail here, though in the Pediatric Feeding Network, we do go deeper in addressing it, including the 3 subtypes: lack of interest in eating, anxiety or fear, and sensory. I also have a blog with more details on this and a much longer free course. So if you're interested in that, feel free to DM me or send me an email. I can get you those. I just wanted to keep today a little bit shorter. But as an overview, ARFID is in the feeding and eating disorders section of the DSM-5. Therefore, it should only be diagnosed by a mental health care practitioner specializing in eating disorders. Though what a lot of us are seeing in real life is that ARFID is being used as a catch-all phrase by doctors or healthcare professionals for regular picky eaters or kids who should actually be diagnosed with a pediatric feeding disorder. So I want to focus more on PFD today. So for the child that isn't responding to regular picky eating strategies like the division of responsibility, there might be an underlying reason why it's hard for them to eat. Now, PFD was developed in 2019, taking into account medical, nutritional, feeding skills, and psychosocial concerns linked with feeding difficulties. And PFD impacts 1 in 37 children under the age of 5. So the official definition is a disturbance in oral intake of nutrients lasting at least 2 weeks that is not age appropriate and is associated with one or more of the following domains. And I'll review these 4 domains. So first of all, we have medical. And the PFD consensus definition paper focuses on aspiration or cardiorespiratory compromise during oral feeding, which are often seen in the NICU and more pertinent to infants. But there are many other underlying medical reasons why it's hard to eat, including cavities, reflux, constipation, allergies. If a child associates pain with eating, that might override their hunger. They could have difficulty breathing, which could be due to enlarged tonsils, for example. So if we aren't able to spot and then refer to treat these conditions, their eating is unlikely to improve. So we might be referring to a doctor or a pediatrician for blood work. Maybe we're referring to a specialist like an allergist, or we'd like them to see a gastroenterologist or an ENT specialist, or sometimes a dentist or airway-centric orthodontist for breathing and airway assessment. And I do go deeper into this in the Pediatric Feeding Network. We have a class taught by a dentist, and it's really fascinating how oral, airway, and dental development can affect health and eating. Okay, nutrition is the second domain of PFD, and this includes malnutrition or not gaining weight, being tube fed or oral supplement dependent, specific nutrient deficiency, or being significantly restricted intake of one or more nutrients due to decreased dietary diversity. And often, I'll see low iron intake affect blood iron levels, which would probably cross over into the medical domain, as low iron leads to low growth and appetite. So these domains are often interlinked. And this nutrition domain, of course, needs the help of a dietitian who can provide nutrition assessment, supplementation recommendations, growth monitoring, perhaps food chain and food play help if they have some training in that, and support implementing the division of responsibility for the family, which is still important. So feeding skills. This domain is determined by whether the food texture or feeding position or feeding strategies for the child need to be modified. This could be due to oral motor weakness or sensory sensitivities, maybe a tongue tie. So a speech language pathologist could help here with swallowing and oral motor control. Occupational therapists can help as well, but we need to find healthcare professionals that specialize in feeding. Often a child will have an OT at school who focuses on other skills but doesn't work on the feeding. And OTs can be great though with sensory work or motor control. And if you're a dietitian like me, I don't expect you to diagnose skills or medical deficits like oral motor or tongue tie, but knowing that these challenges might exist and affect feeding, knowing the red flags and who to refer to helps us to deliver high quality care and participate in that multidisciplinary team. And I do have a training in oral motor and another one on interoception, both taught by occupational therapists in the Pediatric Feeding Network to provide us with some basics. But OTs and SLPs are often a key part of the feeding team. And fourth domain is psychosocial dysfunction, which involves avoidant behaviors by the child when being fed, inadvertent caregiver strategies like only offering preferred food, pressuring to eat, spoon feeding a child that can self-feed, can include disruption of social function within the feeding context, so they have difficulty eating in different settings, and also disruption of the child-caregiver relationship in the feeding context. And we all know how common that is. So you can see there's lots of reasons why a kid might have PFD. I do have an assessment training in modifiable form in my membership to help you with that, because I feel this is one of the main pain points I hear from dietitians and healthcare providers in working with kids is that assessment portion and the forms. So I wanted to throw this slide in here as a reminder. Many of my trainings focus on strategies like improving oral motor skills or expanding food selection, but these aren't going to be successful if the child feels unsafe at the table. And this kind of reframes our role from how do I get this child to eat to how do we help the child feel safe enough at the table to engage. And we really need to support the parents at home with this too, with decreasing the pressure and helping them regulate, because a dysregulated parent is going to lead to a dysregulated child. I love the quote, the most contagious emotions are calm and panic. That's from Lindsay Beckerman, an OT who taught a class on polyvagal inside the network. We also go deeper into concepts like felt safety, as well as supporting parents, because this is often a major roadblock for healthcare professionals working in pediatrics, is the parents. So as dietitians or healthcare providers, you have a crucial role in shaping how families experience mealtime, often being the person they turn to when things start to feel frustrating, confusing, or they're stuck. And the way that we approach these cases can have a lasting impact, not just on what the child eats, but on their long-term relationship with food. So this was a very fast overview, and while it kind of gives us a starting point, I know that you may still feel stuck. Knowing what to do in theory is one thing, but how to apply it consistently across different children, different family dynamics, different levels of complexity is where it gets much harder. So if you're listening to this and recognizing that, even with this information, it's not always clear what to do with a real client, you're not alone. And that's exactly why I created the Pediatric Feeding Network. So if you want support in applying this work with real families and not just theory, I'd love for you to join. And I'm going to quickly walk through what that could look like. So the Pediatric Feeding Network includes training, support, and resources. So for the trainings, some of the presentations I teach, others are taught by guest speakers. We've had OTs, dentists, SLPs, parenting coaches, a child therapist, and fellow expert dietitians. Every training includes a case study, so you're not just learning the concepts, but you're seeing how to actually apply them in real life situations. And you can see here a list of on-demand training topics from the Division of Responsibility, to autism, oral motor, ARFID, parenting. There are currently over 20, and we also have over 20 CPUs if you're an American dietitian and need those credits. So whether you're working with a child where nothing seems to change, or you're unsure how to approach a tricky case involving maybe oral motor challenges or autism, you have something to refer back to instead of feeling like you're figuring it out on your own. But I want you to know there's no need to binge these courses or start from the beginning. It's not a course you have to get through. It's a growing resource library built to support you when these challenges come up. So Angie, a network member, said this network has been a one-stop shop for all things picky eating. The trainings have been invaluable, and I love all of them, including all the rich discussions that we have. The topics presented are innovative and relevant. I'm so grateful to be part of this network. So thank you, Angie. But it's not just content, you'll also get support, because I know what it's like to work alone or be the only dietitian on your team with nobody to ask questions to or bounce hard cases off of. I remember what that feels like as a new dietitian working at a children's hospital, seeing patients. I remember these specific parents that came in to talk about their child, and they argued with each other the entire time. No progress was made. It was awkward and frustrating for everyone. And my only tool at the time was the division of responsibility. And of course, I was the only dietitian on the ward. So I created this network that would have provided me with a ton of relief years ago, because when you join, you have access to me via email or Zoom. And we also have a private chat group for members to share resources or ask questions. And I've also created a custom chatbot that's been trained on network content to help you so that no matter what tricky situation comes your way, you can get support. And I think this is often the piece that practitioners don't realize that's missing until they have it. We also have handouts and resources for you. So I have a pre-made picky eating presentation you can use with parents so you don't have to waste time creating your own, and customizable handouts that you can use directly with clients, like that pediatric assessment form to help you identify red flags and guide your sessions and referrals more effectively. So when you think about having access to the recordings, we have 4 live trainings a year, real case examples, support, and these practical tools. I really believe that network membership is worth thousands of dollars. I introduced it over 5 years ago now at the rate of $809, and it's only built up from there. But today you can join for $500. So, if this is something that you've been wanting support with, I'd encourage you to take advantage of that now, and I'd love to have you inside the network. You can scan this QR code, or there's a link below this video if you want to join us. And I also have group rates available. So if you work in a group like WIC or in a healthcare team, please reach out, and I'm happy to speak to you or your manager about group rates. So thanks so much for sticking around. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me at Pediatric Feeding Network on Instagram. We can voice note back and forth, or always send an email to jen@firststepnutrition.com.